Heather Chitty, who is here today to watch her sister speak and make the presentation. Karen's research has focused on Gananoque and the surrounding area. Living next door to social reformer Agnes Molly Macker's former summer home, Karen took a special interest in the history of Macker, and this led Karen to publish Afternoon Tea with Agnes Molly Macker, a collection of photographs, quotes, and memories celebrating her life and legacy. And I expect we're going to learn a few notes of history today that we did not know before. In 2024, Karen shared another side of history with Probus, presenting her Popular Boat Builder series. Karen continues her mission to keep local history alive and ensure the voices of the past are always remembered. Let's give Karen a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me back and allowing me to discuss Agnes Molly Macker with you today. Is it not, do I need to be closer? I'm not going to be able to handle all this. But thanks for having me back. I believe there are things that Miss Macker championed that remain just as relevant today as they were in her time. Agnes Molly Macker was a quaint figure from the distant past who owned a forest in Gananoque, where children have fond memories of playing over the generations. Did we ever stop to wonder who Macker was, that the woods were named after? The woods we trespassed on all these years. She was truly remarkable. She's unusual, she's exceptional, she's interesting, and she's worth getting to know. Let's get acquainted, shall we? Agnes Molly Macker was born in Kingston on the 23rd of January in 1837 at 117 Earl Street, 4 years before the St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church manse was completed. She lived in Kingston all of her life until 1871, when she acquired Ferncliff in Gananoque, and then she would spend half the year in Gan and half the year in Kingston, or in her travels. Reverend John Macker was a Scottish Presbyterian minister who co-founded and was an early principal of Queen's University. He raised his daughter in an intellectual atmosphere. Margaret Sims Macker was the daughter and wife of Presbyterian ministers. She dedicated her life to religious and charitable activities in Kingston and had a profound influence on her daughter's impressionable mind and heart. If any of you have had occasion to use Kingston General Hospital or has had a friend there, it's because of Miss Macker and the Female Benevolent Society who accepted the challenge to meet a grant from the government to have a hospital built in Kingston. So Miss Macker and the Female Benevolent Society. You can thank for that. So aside from a year, back to Miss Macker, aside from a year spent at Miss Hannah Lyman's School for Girls in Montreal, her father provided her with a solid education at home, which was typical for girls in the upper, middle, and professional classes. She competed in fine art competitions locally, and in 1859, her pencil drawings won both first and second prizes. She continued submitting her art to competitions, winning a prize in 1887 for a Marine View watercolor. This is an oil painting of Miss Macker's that's held in a private collection. She began writing at an early age, and although discouraged by her mother, she went on to become a prolific poet, a novelist, essayist, historian, and journalist in adulthood. She adopted the pen name Fidelis to signify her commitment to Christian faithfulness and possibly to hide her activities from her mother. Miss Macker received multiple awards for her fiction and poetry. She was often invited to recite her patriotic verses at literary gatherings, and her poetry was included in early Canadian school textbooks. When Archibald Lampman, who was considered the finest of Canada's late 19th century poets in English, listed 13 promising Canadian writers in a speech to the Literary and Scientific Society of Ottawa, Macker was the only woman included on his list. She was an honorary member of the Canadian Women's Press Club and the first woman to conduct a women's column in any Canadian newspaper. She was vice president of the Canadian Society of Authors and president of the Kingston branch of the Women's Art Association of Canada. 30 years before Lucy Maud Montgomery's Anne of Green Gables was published, Agnes wrote Katie Johnson's Cross in 1870, which won the Campbell's Prize, awarded by a Toronto publisher. She followed this up the next year with Lucy Raymond or The Children's Watchword. After her intellectual gifts and literary accomplishments established her as one of Canada's most cherished literary nationalists, and would certainly have qualified her for membership in such organizations as the Royal Society of Canada, but her gender kept her out. She was engaged in most of the lively debates of the day. Her causes included the welfare and status of laborers, women's education, temperance, nationalism, and the humane treatment of animals. She believed in the golden rule, that people should treat others as they would like to be treated, and she hoped the saying would be displayed on every classroom wall. If it helps, I remember when I was going to school that it made it to the wall. Her remarkable writing in late Victorian Canada, spanning 5 decades, profoundly highlights the historical and national challenges of her time, showcasing her enduring impact and relevance. On April 16, 1887, a meeting was convened to establish a society dedicated to preventing cruelty. Although it was reported that few ladies were present, likely due to the storm that night, one of their vice presidents, Miss Agnes Mall Macker, did show up. Agnes Macker says, "I was one of those present at the first meeting and have ever since endeavored to keep it up." By December of 1920, it was reported that every child in Gananoque was a friend to dumb animals, thanks to her visits to local schools promoting Bands of Mercy. Bands of Mercy were historical organizations focused on teaching children kindness towards animals and preventing animal cruelty. At the time of her death, she was commended for the many poor beasts that were saved from suffering through her influence upon children in the schools, and masters who were more thoughtless than deliberately cruel. So that was written on the 27th of January, 1927 in the Kingston Whig. So she's with a group of the Canadian Women's Press Club here in Fitzhugh, BC. Does anybody know where Fitzhugh, BC is? It's been in the news quite a bit last year because it's Jasper today. So the work she did at that time, the Humane Society International, or Canada, is a leading force for animal protection, with active programs in companion animals, wildlife and habitat protection, marine mammal preservation, farm animal welfare, and animals in research. Humane societies originally focused on both animal welfare and the well-being of children. They were the forerunners of the Children's Aid Society. This is Mary Ellen Wilson. She was the first case of child abuse in the United States history that went to trial in 1874. A neighbor who discovered the situation went to the police and charitable organizations. They didn't have any laws against beating children. So the founder of the Humane Society was able to bring the case to trial, resulting in her removal from her home, and her mother was sentenced to a year in jail. Agnes Macker read a paper entitled Birds and Bonnets at a convention of the National Council of Women in 1887. She wrote, "It seems too hideous and unnatural an idea that our birds should perish in order to supply a superfluous addition for her bonnet and a few dollars for those who find trading in murdered songsters an easy way of making money. But we are destroying our forests at the bidding of selfish interests as fast as we can. So in time we shall have neither birds nor trees for them to live in." That was in 1887. British designer Stella McCartney lamented the billions of birds that have been killed to enhance people's appearance at her Paris show on September 30th, 2024. She appealed to the fashion world to change their ways. And this is how Stella deals with birds in fashion. She puts a print on the material. Norma Reed is an online clothing designer, and she said one of the biggest trends we're seeing on the runway and in prom fashion this year is feathers. She wrote, "The allure of the feather prom dress is absolutely enchanting and makes a striking statement on your special night. This one-of-a-kind design exudes an air of grace and sophistication that leaves everyone in awe. The feather prom dress creates an impeccable blend of whimsical beauty and timeless elegance, capturing not just your heart, but also the hearts of everyone at your prom." So I thought about it, and I thought, I'm gonna monkey around with that a little bit, and I said, "The allure of the feathered bird is absolutely enchanting and makes a striking statement. This one-of-a-kind design exudes an air of grace and sophistication that leaves everyone in awe. The feathered bird creates an impeccable blend of whimsical beauty and timeless elegance, capturing not just your heart, but the hearts of everyone." In the 1870s, the opinions of doctors in the United States and Britain significantly influenced notions regarding the suitable education for women. Victorian Canadians relied on doctors to explain how women differed from men. Doctors identified that the reproductive and sexual systems play a crucial role in women's health, linking them to the onset of various health issues and diseases. Although Canadian women may have been stronger and healthier than men, doctors created and reinforced an image of women as the constitutionally weaker sex. Medical professionals endeavored to regulate women's diets, clothing, reading materials, and even postures, believing that they had the interest of future generations at heart. Physicians assumed control over every aspect of women's lives. They felt that modeling women's education on men's was dangerous to their health, particularly for their reproductive capacity. Young girls were expected to learn how to dance to help them find husbands. I hope we're all doing that. Miss Macker invited critics to consider the potential harm that the current educational model might inflict on young men, and to evaluate its overall effectiveness. She often emphasized the problem of the cramming system, requiring children to engage in several hours of intensive mental work after school could be equally damaging to boys as it is for girls. And I don't think much has changed in the cramming system even to this day. Macker observed that when boys experience stress or injury, it is unlikely to be seen as an indication that pursuing higher education was a mistake. She recognized that boys may be more likely to avoid overwork by not participating in it. She said that's not. She said, just as nourishing food fuels the bodies of boys and girls, enriching studies can equally inspire and develop their mental abilities. Although mental characteristics may vary, the mental processes, like the nutritional process, are similar for both sexes. What strengthens one sex will have a similar effect on the other. Furthermore, she argued, The goal of education should be to enhance the weaker or less developed faculties. Ms. Macker believed that your actions spoke louder than your words. She held positions as a director of the House of Industry, secretary of the Committee of Poor Relief, executive member of the National Council of Women. She was a founder of the local Council of Women in Kingston, a secretary of the YMCA, and vice president of the Humane and Historical Societies. She was made an honorary member of the Ontario Historical Society. She wrote Roland Graham Night, a novel of our time, and it was published in 1892. It tackled the social and economic problems of industrialization. While Ms. Macker supported improving working conditions with shorter hours and higher wages, she emphasized the need for responsible leadership. She was a member of St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Gananoque, which makes sense since she was in Gananoque for half the year, so she would find a church to be at home with while she was here. So in 1877, Miss Macker and Mrs. Mowat formed the Women's Foreign Missionary Society at St. Andrews. Mrs. Mowat's first on the list. She and her husband had a cottage on McDonald Island, and also not directly related to, she's related to the author Farley Mowat. This is an honor roll for the Diamond Jubilee of the Women's Foreign Missionary Society, and they supported missionaries in India. Miss Macker was raised in an environment that was both intellectual and religious. She argued that true hypocrisy existed in churches that preached to the poor about saving their souls while ignoring their physical needs. Privileged Christians must understand that the poor deserve the right to work, justice, and the means to rise above mere survival. In her novel, Roland Graham Night, a novel for our times, Orthodox Christians applaud a mill owner who gives $5,000 to the church, even as they ignore the miserable dwellings in which he houses his workers, and the grim factory where they toil for wages, and he threatens to reduce. Challenging this villain and a complacent clergyman is Roland, a crusading journalist who advocates for Christian socialism. Christian socialists identify the cause of social inequality to be the greed that they associate with capitalism. Christian socialism became a major movement in the United Kingdom beginning in the 19th century. Macker was no mere commentator on social conditions. She always tried to connect thought with action. In 1847, when many widows and orphans were left behind due to the ravages of typhus and cholera, a number of ladies from the Female Benevolent Society exerted every effort for their relief. They arranged job opportunities and provided relief for widows, as well as they hired a teacher for the orphan children, all at their own expense. The House of Industry was constructed to combat poverty in Kingston by offering room and board in exchange for work, such as breaking rocks and sewing. So it was men and women that were taken care of in the House of Industry. The Kingston House of Industry was flawed and mismanaged, although it provided insight into the social institutions emerging in Canada and eventually throughout the developed world. The extraordinary women of the Female Benevolent Society recognized a critical need and acted, making a significant difference in their community. In 1852, the society was revisited and reorganized and became the Widows and Orphans Friend Society. Ms. Macker was involved with both of the previously mentioned organizations and gained a position on the board of directors of Kingston's House of Industry. So from there, the government departments today that assist people in need, because people still need help. So you'll have your Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, the Family Responsibility Office, Ontario Disability Support Program, and Ontario Works. Volunteers provides service to assist individuals where the governmental programs are lacking. I didn't know about this group. It's a local, it was a Canadian effort to, for the past 12 years, they have grown from a local effort into a Canadian registered charity that now houses 46 children and feeds over 400 people every week in Africa. The International Widows and Orphans Fund. Speaking to the National Council of Women in Canada in 1895, she recommended that the state establish homes for the elderly if necessary. Despite her prohibitionist views, she wanted the housing to feel home-like, enough to permit the occasional drink. Her views on prohibition were not an attempt to legislate morality. She recognized that would be impossible. It aimed to remove alcohol from the reach of those who were its victims. To her, alcoholism seemed to have been more of a disease than a manifestation of moral weakness. Ultimately, she would assist elderly women directly by leaving a behest to establish the Agnes Macker Home for old ladies past earning their own livelihood. The home operated for over 60 years without any government funding. And we still need help in that regard. In 2025, long-term care facilities will provide a range of services for those who can no longer live independently. These homes are funded by the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care and are governed by legislated standards. Macker's discussions about women in the professions and paid work address 2 key points. First, women should be given the opportunity to support themselves, especially in the absence of a suitable marriage. Or if their husband died, that's why they needed a house of industry, because these women had children and couldn't support themselves. But they sure could make their hair look great. and second, they should be free to develop their God-given talents to the fullest extent, regardless of their gender. The author expresses disdain for women who exist solely to squander the earnings of others and who lead aimless and futile lives in contrast to their working class counterparts. She passionately linked women's low energy and enthusiasm to a shallow education that prepared them for little beyond trivial activities, leading to a sense of intellectual stagnation. Macker examined various occupations that allowed women to escape an unproductive reliance on others and support themselves with dignity. These included clerks, waitresses, teachers, telephone operators, as well as light manufacturing jobs, such as shoemaking, printing, and the tobacco industry. And additionally, 41% of the labor force was employed as servants, dressmakers, and seamstresses. Macker, here I'm going to go with the women's lib stuff. Macker emphasized the importance of adequate remuneration for women's work. The principle must be established that work should be paid for according to the intrinsic value and not according to the sex of the worker. In 1879, she stated, let me repeat that, 1879, she said it is fundamentally unjust to pay women less than men for the same work, and only thoughtless conventionality could have allowed this to persist for so long. But it still does. And we have the Pay Equity Office today that administers the Ontario Pay Equity Act. The Act's purpose is to eliminate inequality between women and men who perform work of comparable value to their organization. Ms. Macker was a proud nationalist and imperialist. She showed little interest in the details of nation building. Instead, she advocated for a vision with a strong moral purpose, free from unpleasant partisan politics and racial tension. The Canadian Index of Well-Being, or CIW, is built upon core consensus values that reflect Canadian society. These values include fairness, inclusion, economic security, diversity, health, democracy, equity, safety, and sustainability. The CIW framework also identifies 8 domains of life that contribute to overall well-being, shifting the focus between economic factors to encompass a broader view of quality of life. And some of those things are community vitality, education, environment, leisure, and culture, are some of the things that are part of this group. In 1879, she composed a moving poem for Dominion Day, urging Canada's politicians to set a strong moral example and establish the ethical foundation of a nation in its early years. 16 years later, parliamentary expert John George Borno concluded his book, How Canada is Governed, with a stanza from her poem, and reviewers praised it. On February 1st, 2025, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries criticized President Donald Trump for attributing the deadly DC plane crash to diversity policies. In part, he said, we need integrity, we need decency, we need leadership, not misdirection and misinformation. You're probably aware Ms. Macker was a very strong patriot, and when I first agreed to prepare this, I didn't know what I was going to say about how Canadians responded to patriotism until Donald Trump was related. You know, that was it. She wrote unsuccessful letters and essays pleading for clemency for Louis Riel, and after World War I, she compiled and translated letters from French soldiers who had died in the conflict. If she believed in something, she would defend it, even if it was unpopular. Miss Macker divided her time between Kingston and her beloved Gananoque property, Ferncliff. William Stone MacDonald sold two parcels of what we know as 401 King Street West. One parcel went to George Romanes in 1857, and the other went to Alexander Campbell in 1862. Unusual for her time, Miss Macker leased the Romanes parcel in April of 1873. By 1904, she had purchased both of them. Miss Macker's poems testified to the joy, calm, and sense of wonderment she derived from nature. A stanza in the poem, September Among the Thousand Islands, for instance, celebrates the environment of her beloved Ferncliff. I think I skipped something here. Anyway, so part of her September Among the Thousand Islands, she wrote, so calm, so tranquil, the river's expanse, no ripple on its peaceful breast. It might be a sea of fairyland, by some strange magic laid to rest, and the gray, hazy islands seem the vision of a passing dream. She wrote The Rape of the Islands in July of 1894 in The Week, which was Canada's leading political and literary periodical. She said, it is true that we as a people should show our appreciation of one of our national glories by taking means not merely to preserve the islands for the use and pleasure of the Canadian people and the delight of future travelers to our dominion, but also to conserve their long haunted beauty, the rugged, picturesque charm which our Canadian islands in general have kept through centuries of change and entitlement around them. 4 years later, in 1898, which is the date of this map, the government had reserved some of the islands for the purpose of parks, as indicated by the blocked out islands. It began with a small piece of waterfront property granted to the federal government by the Mallory family with the stipulation that it be used as park purposes. 9 federally owned islands in the St. Lawrence River were added. Environment and Climate Change Canada protects and conserves our natural heritage, predicts weather and environmental conditions, prevents and manages pollution, promotes clean growth, and ensures a sustainable environment for present and future generations. So this was something she had been asking for several years before a national park was implemented in our area. On July 27th, 1937, the Gananoque Historical back up. Agnes Malmacher passed away on January 27th, 1927. 8 days later, the new street between Adelaide and River, on which the new bridge spans Gananoque River, was opened. It was named Macker Street in her honor. On July 27, 1937, the Gananoque Historical Society attended a special meeting with the town council led by Mayor Albert K. Stabler, who voted that in recognition of the many diverse contributions made by Miss Macker to the town, the small park at the town's west end, commonly known as the Bluffs, shall be officially named in future the Agnes Malmacher Park. Her extraordinary contributions to the town of Gananoque went unrecognized for an astonishing 82 years, a testament to the need of greater acknowledgement of those who make a difference in our communities. In February of 2015, the federal government designated Miss Macker a person of national historic importance. 82 years later, in 2019, following the approval by the town of Gananoque, the park at the west end of town was officially named Agnes Malmacher Park. This is a oil on canvas painting that E. Grace Coombs painted in 1913. It's part of the Agnes Etherington collection in Kingston, Ontario, and I included here because of all the things she did, was involved with. She still had time to knit. So I just would like to conclude. I hope that you've enjoyed getting to know Miss Macker a little bit better and why we think she's pretty fascinating. And before I conclude, you recall the 3 principles that Miss Macker lived by that I mentioned. Well, it was the golden rule, to treat others the way you would like to be treated, that your actions speak louder than words, and if you believe in something or someone, defend it, even if it's unpopular. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for Karen? Oh, there you go.
Karen,
Yes.
I just wondered where the Westward School would have been.
Well, it's on Victoria Avenue, and it's apartments now, but it went from the school to the Scout Hall.
Scout Hall,
Yeah.
okay, I got you.
Any other questions? I have one. Is there any trails in the park?
Well, it's still private property, right? So there's not really trails, but people do go in there. We used to cut through going to school. I'm sure you guys did the same
All
thing.
the time.
Everybody did. It was cooler to go through the woods. It was cooler to go through the woods than it was to go down Osborne Street in the sun on a day like today. It was nice.
Our kids played there all the time, but kids don't do it. It's not
Well, I went in for a walk one day to go up to see the view, and I'm walking by a tree, and there's 2 empty cans of Budweiser beer. So I said, "Oh, the Americans are here." I hope people would just, I'd like to say we're going to offer her some respect, because we get many people saying, "Well, I've just known it as the Bluffs, I'm gonna call it the Bluffs," and I'm going, "Well, you're trespassing on her property, could you not call it Miss Macker's Woods, or could you not, even Macker's Park, could we not do that?" But, the fact that we're talking about her and she's receiving some recognition, the things she talked about in the 1880s, we're still talking about today and dealing with, I think shows you she was quite far ahead of her time. Anything else, folks?
Now's the time.
Now's the time. I won't answer any questions at lunch, so don't even attempt that.
Karen will be joining us for lunch for anybody that is going to the Old English pub today. So I know that I learned a few things today that I was not aware of, so hopefully everyone else did also. So you all know what your part's gonna be in this one. So this isn't new to Karen because she joined us last year, but fresh loaf of bread picked up at 8:10 this morning, so nice and fresh. So we say to ourselves,
My bread.
thank you, everyone. Boy, you're right on cue. Bread has been a staple of life throughout history and is seen in its many forms in every culture. The breaking and sharing of bread is symbolic of life, peace, and friendships. This loaf of bread is given to you, Karen, as a symbol of our friendship and in thanks for sharing the story you prepared for us today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. I could point out that these women are big deal authors. Oh, sorry, I went back one. This is on Pinehurst Island, or it's called Pitch Pine Island. And the three ladies, one's Helena Coleman, her brother on the island was a big deal Canadian geologist. She was a writer. One's from Australia, but it was a big deal in 1914 that these women got together here.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen.
Would Brian Scholes and Lana Marion please come up? I have your guest badges. You are here. I know you're here. They were, yeah. Okay. Oh, now, before we adjourn, I will call the meeting adjourned. And we have some announcements, and I think it was Suzanne that was going to make an announcement. If you want to come up.
Thank you very much. I want to tell everyone that Cliff Edwards from the Gananoque Seniors Association will be advertising soon for the next fall events and classes. And Kevin Quinn and myself will be teaching some ballroom dancing, which involves the foxtrot, the waltz, the rumba, the jive, and the swing to the intermediate class, and also a beginner's class. And we will be starting on Friday afternoon at 2:30 on the 12th of September, and it will go till the 14th of November. So that involves about 10 classes weekly, every Friday afternoon. And you're all welcome to come and join us and have some fun dancing, and we'll hope to see you there. And they will be advertising their classes shortly, so I don't know exactly when that is, but come and join us and have some fun.
Thank you, Suzanne. Well, I guess that concludes. I guess that concludes our. Oh, sorry, one more.
So after the picnic on the 20th in Rockport, they have a Music by the River series. So you can bring your lawn chairs. It's free entertainment at the waterfront. And so featuring Tim Holman and Terry Hoffman. So chance to go, and it starts at 6:30. So you can have your picnic and then go down to the waterfront.
Two birds with one stone. Okay, I guess, is there any more announcements? Okay, that concludes our meeting then. Thank you. See you next month.